The night had settled over New Orleans like velvet, but no one could explain the unease. It was 1927, and the Mississippi River whispered secrets to those who listened. In the French Quarter, down a narrow alley where gas lamps flickered against brick walls, there existed a place that didn't officially exist. The Blue Crescent, a speakeasy hidden behind a laundromat, where jazz notes floated through cigar smoke and prohibition meant nothing. The man at the piano had no name that anyone remembered. They called him simply the player, and for 3 years he had arrived at midnight, played until dawn, and disappeared before the sun touched the cobblestones. His fingers moved across ivory keys with a familiarity that seemed older than the instrument itself. That evening, as autumn rain began to tap against the windows, something felt different. The club owner, a woman named Marguerite, noticed it first. She had seen 1,000 nights in this place, served bootleg whiskey to poets and criminals alike. But tonight the player's melody carried a weight that pressed against her chest. She paused while wiping down the mahogany bar, her hand trembling slightly. A young couple entered, shaking rain from their coats. The woman wore pearls that caught the amber light. Her companion, a man with tired eyes, guided her to a corner table. They didn't speak, but their silence was comfortable, earned through years rather than awkwardness. The player's fingers found a minor chord. Imagine, if you would, that you were there in that moment. The air thick with the scent of tobacco and aged wood. The warmth of bodies gathered against the cool October night outside. The way the music seemed to come not from the piano, but from the walls themselves. As if the building had been waiting years to exhale this particular song. Behind the bar, Marguerite remembered the first night the player had walked through her door. It was 1924, just after her husband had died in a fishing accident on Lake Pontchartrain. She had been ready to close the place, to surrender to the grief that felt heavier than the humid Louisiana air. But then this stranger had sat at her piano and played a melody that sounded like forgiveness. She never asked his story. In New Orleans, especially in places like the Blue Crescent, you learned not to ask. The rain grew heavier, drumming a rhythm against the roof. Inside, shadows danced in the corners where candlelight couldn't quite reach. The young couple swayed gently to the music, their movements barely perceptible, as if they were dancing in a dream. Other patrons sat scattered throughout the room, a merchant sailor still wearing his cap, an elderly woman in a purple dress who came every Thursday, a writer who never wrote but always carried a leather journal. They were all waiting, though for what, none could say. The player's melody shifted, climbing into a brighter key, but there was something underneath it, a current of melancholy that refused to be denied. His eyes remained closed as his fingers danced, as they had for countless nights. The lines on his face told stories of decades lived, though his movements held the fluid grace of youth. But perhaps the real story lay not in who he was, but in what he remembered. Years ago, so many that the number had lost meaning, there had been another life. A woman with a laugh like church bells, a small house on Dauphine Street with blue shutters, Sunday mornings that stretched into afternoons, filled with nothing but contentment, and the smell of beignets from the cafe down the street. Her name had been Celeste. The melody dipped lower, and several patrons felt an inexplicable urge to close their eyes. The merchant sailor's head nodded forward. The elderly woman in purple smiled softly, her fingers tapping against her glass in time with the music. Even Marguerite found herself swaying, her duties temporarily forgotten. In that moment, the Blue Crescent existed outside of time itself. Celeste had been a singer once. Not in places like this, but in the grand theaters where respectable people gathered. She had a voice that could silence rooms, that could make hardened men weep and cynics believe in beauty. They had met by Chauncey, a piano player in a riverboat band. She, a rising star with offers from New York and Chicago. She had chosen to stay. For him, the rain continued its patient percussion against the windows. Inside, the temperature had dropped slightly, and someone had lit the fireplace in the corner. Orange flames cast moving shadows across the exposed brick walls, creating an ever-shifting gallery of shapes and suggestions. The smoke from cigars rose in lazy spirals toward the tin ceiling, where a slow-moving fan stirred the air without really cooling it. This was New Orleans in its essence, hot and cool, bright and dark, joyful and mournful, all at once. The young couple had stopped pretending to be separate people. Now they held each other close, moving as one entity to the player's song. The woman's head rested on her companion's shoulder, and in the flickering light, tears traced silent paths down her cheeks. But she was smiling. What memories lived in that embrace? What story had brought them here, to this illegal room on this rainy night, seeking solace in the music of a nameless man? The player's fingers found a sequence of notes that hadn't been heard in these walls before. Marguerite looked up sharply, recognition flashing across her features. She knew this melody. Everyone in New Orleans of a certain age knew it. It had been famous once, sung in the opera house before the fire of 1919, before everything changed. The opera house fire had taken 63 lives. Celeste had been scheduled to perform that night, but at the last moment, she had felt unwell. The player had insisted she stay home, had made her tea and sat with her while she protested that she was letting people down. They had heard the fire bells from their little house on Dauphine Street by morning. Her career was ashes. Not because she couldn't sing anymore, but because she couldn't bear to. Every note reminded her of the voices that would never sing again. The melody continued, winding through memories like the Mississippi wound through Louisiana. The player's shoulders moved with the music, his whole body an instrument translating emotion into sound. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air. His breathing had deepened, syncing with the rhythm he created. Around the room, the effect was unmistakable. The merchant sailor had begun to quietly weep, though he showed no sign of waking. The elderly woman's eyes had glazed over with a faraway look, seeing something beyond the walls of the Blue Crescent. Even the writer had stopped fidgeting with his journal and sat perfectly still. Transfixed music, the old folks said, was the closest thing to time travel humanity would ever achieve. After the fire, Celeste had withdrawn into silence. She had stopped singing, stopped going to theaters, stopped seeing friends. For months, the player had watched helplessly as the woman he loved disappeared into grief. Their little house on Dauphine Street had become a mausoleum for a life that no longer was. He had tried everything: jokes, gifts, pleading, space. Nothing reached her. Then one night, unable to sleep, he had sat at their piano and played. Not for her, but for himself. He played his frustration and fear, his love and helplessness, his desperate hope that somewhere inside the shell beside him, Celeste still existed. He played until his fingers cramped and dawn light crept through their windows. When he finished, she was standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Again, she had whispered, "Play it again." The tempo in the Blue Crescent had slowed. Now, the melody stretching out like taffy, each note hanging in the air before dissolving into the next. The rain outside had gentled to a whisper. The fire crackled softly. Someone's glass touched the table with a barely audible click, Marguerite moved through the room, her footsteps silent on the worn wooden floor. She refilled drinks without being asked, tucked a blanket around the elderly woman's shoulders, adjusted the lamp on the writer's table. These were her people, her strange collection of souls who had all found their way to this hidden room for reasons they probably couldn't articulate. The Blue Crescent was more than a speakeasy. It was a refuge. For 6 months after that night, the player had played for Celis every evening. Slowly, incrementally, she had begun to return. A smile here, a hummed harmony there. Eventually, she began to sing again, but only for him. Only in their house on Dauphine Street, where the blue shutters kept out the judging world. They were enough for each other, or so he had believed. But Celeste had been courted by guilt in ways he couldn't fight. She felt she had stolen the future those 63 people would never have. She felt she should have been there, should have died with them, should have done something, anything differently. The player's music could make her forget, but only temporarily. One morning in 1924, he woke to find her side of the bed empty and a note on the piano. The melody in the Blue Crescent shifted again, and this time it carried something newer, ? In musical form. The young couple had stopped dancing and now sat at their table, holding hands across the scarred wood surface, their eyes closed. The merchant sailor's breathing had deepened into sleep. The elderly woman smiled as if at a pleasant dream. Outside, the rain had stopped, and in its absence, the city's other sounds emerged. Distant laughter from another street, a car horn, the low moan of a ship on the river. New Orleans never truly slept. It merely changed costumes between acts. The note had been short. She couldn't live with her survival. She couldn't live with the silence inside her that his music could only temporarily fill. She loved him, would always love him, but she had to go somewhere her memories couldn't follow. She didn't say where. She asked him not to search. He had searched anyway, for months, then years. Every lead evaporated like morning mist. It was as if Celeste had become a ghost, haunting his memory but existing nowhere in the physical world. Eventually, he stopped searching and started playing. The Blue Crescent had found him, or he had found it, in that mysterious way that broken things sometimes discover each other. Marguerite had heard him playing in the street one night, a battered piano someone had wheeled out during a block party. She had listened for an hour before approaching him with an offer. "Play in my club," she had said. "Every night, if you want. I'll pay you in whiskey and silence." He had been playing here ever since. The melody was approaching something now. The patrons could feel it, even those who slept. It was like watching a storm build on the horizon, seeing the lightning in the distance, feeling the first cool breath of wind that promised rain. The player's fingers moved faster, finding complex runs and unexpected harmonies. His face remained serene, but his body had tensed with the effort of what he was creating. Marguerite stood behind the bar, one hand pressed against her heart. She knew, somehow she knew, this was the last night. For 3 years the player had performed the same ritual. He arrived at midnight, played until dawn, and disappeared. He never accepted his pay. He never stayed for conversation. He simply came and played and left, as if the music itself was his penance, his prayer, his reason for drawing breath. But tonight, something had completed. The melody reached its crescendo, not loud, but intense, every note carrying the weight of years. The young couple gripped each other tighter. The writer's hand moved to his journal, though his eyes remained closed. The elderly woman's lips moved silently, as if singing along to words only she could hear. And then, softly, almost imperceptibly, the music began to fade, not stopping, but dissolving. Each phrase a little quieter than the last, each chord a little more distant. Like watching someone walk into fog, their form growing less distinct with each step until they become indistinguishable from the mist itself. The player's hands slowed, his breathing deepened. His eyes, which had been closed throughout, opened. They were peaceful. He played the final chorda, major resolution that felt like sunrise, like forgiveness, like letting go. The note hung in the air of the Blue Crescent, sustained by the room's perfect acoustics and the collective held breath of everyone present. It seemed to last forever. Then silence, complete, profound, sacred silence. The player stood slowly, his joints stiff from hours at the piano. He turned to face the room, and for the first time in 3 years, he smiled. It transformed his face, erasing decades in an instant. He looked at each person, the sleeping sailor, the dreaming woman in purple, the young couple still embracing, the writer finally opening his eyes, Marguerite behind her bar. He nodded once. A benediction, a thank you, a goodbye. Then he walked toward the door, his footsteps the only sound in the hushed room. His hand touched the brass doorknob, tarnished by thousands of other hands over the years. He paused there, and for a moment it seemed he might speak, might finally share his story in words rather than music. But he didn't. Some stories were meant to live in other forms. The door opened, and cool air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain-washed streets and night-blooming jasmine. The player stepped through, and the door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a period at the end of a sentence. For a long moment, no one moved. The spell of the music still held them, that sacred space between sound and silence where truth lives. Then, gradually, they began to stir. The merchant sailor lifted his head, confused about how he'd fallen asleep. The young couple separated, though their hands remained intertwined. The writer picked up his pen, finally ready to fill those blank pages. Marguerite walked to the piano. There, on the bench where the player always sat, was something that hadn't been there before. A photograph, old and faded. A woman with a smile like church bells, standing in front of a house with blue shutters. On the back, in handwriting she didn't recognize, were 5 words: "She was waiting for me." Marguerite held the photograph gently, as if it might dissolve. She looked at the door, then back at the piano, then at her patrons who were gathering their things, preparing to return to the world outside where prohibition existed and rules mattered. And music was just music, but they would all carry something with them. A feeling, a memory, a moment of perfect understanding that couldn't be articulated, but would never be forgotten. The elderly woman in purple approached the bar. "He found her," she said simply. It wasn't a question. Marguerite nodded. "Yes, I believe he did. Where do you think they are now?" Marguerite looked toward the door, seeing beyond it to the rain-washed streets, the river, the vast night that held all of New Orleans in its embrace. She smiled. Somewhere the music never stops. The Blue Crescent emptied slowly. One by one, the patrons stepped back into their lives, carrying with them the gift the player had given, proof that love could outlast grief, that music could bridge any distance, that some promises were kept even beyond the boundaries of this world. Marguerite locked the door behind the last customer. She walked through the empty room, extinguishing candles, banking the fire, returning glasses to their shelves. She moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had performed these rituals thousands of times, but tonight felt different, lighter, as if a weight the room had been carrying had finally been lifted. She stopped at the piano, running her fingers across the keys. They were still warm. She pressed one, and the note rang out clear and true in the empty space. It faded slowly, reluctantly, like it didn't want to leave. Marguerite picked up the photograph from the bench. She would frame it, she decided. She would hang it on the wall, and when people asked who they were, she would tell them the truth. To people who found each other twice. Outside, dawn was beginning to think about arriving. The sky had shifted from black to navy to a deep purple that promised day. The Mississippi River continued its eternal flow toward the Gulf, carrying with it the stories and secrets of everyone who had ever lived along its banks. Somewhere in that vast darkness between night and day, two figures walked together. They didn't speak because they didn't need to. Their hands were joined, their steps matched, their breathing synchronized. Around them, music played not from any instrument, but from the universe itself. The music that exists in the space between heartbeats, in the pause between words, in the infinite moment between endings and beginnings. They had found each other again, as he had always known they would, as she had always hoped they would. In the Blue Crescent, Marguerite dimmed the last light. She stood in the darkness, feeling the presence of all the nights that had happened here. All the stories told in smoke and whiskey and jazz. She felt grateful to have witnessed this one, this tale of love and loss and music and reunion. Tomorrow, she would open again. Tomorrow, new people would come seeking refuge in the smoke and sound. Tomorrow, life would continue its beautiful, brutal, mysterious dance. But tonight belonged to the player and his cellist, wherever they were. Tonight was theirs. Marguerite climbed the stairs to her apartment above the club. She placed the photograph on her nightstand, where she could see it from her bed. Then she lay down, suddenly exhausted, and closed her eyes as she drifted towards sleep. She could have sworn she heard it faint, but unmistakable. The sound of a piano playing somewhere far away, and over it, like honey over bread, the sound of a woman singing. The voice was pure and clear and filled with joy. Marguerite smiled and slept and dreamed of blue shutters and church bells and love that lasted longer than life. The night had settled completely now. The rain had gone. The streets were quiet. The river flowed on, and somewhere in the vast darkness, music played eternal, beautiful, free. This is how some stories end. Not with fanfare or explanation, but with a quiet truth that settles over everything like blessing. The player had searched for years, played for thousands of nights, carried his grief and hope like equal weights, and in the end, he had found her. Or perhaps she had found him. Or perhaps, in that mysterious way that love works, they had simply arrived at the same destination at the same time. Their separate journeys finally converging. The Blue Crescent would open tomorrow, but it would never sound quite the same. That particular music, that specific magic, had left with the player. It had served its purpose. It had carried him through the years until he could finally rest. Until they could finally rest. Together, as the sun began to paint the sky with shades of pink and gold, New Orleans stirred. Vendors set up market stalls. Fishermen checked their nets. Children woke for school. Life, in all its ordinary glory, continued. But those who had been in the Blue Crescent that night would carry something extra with them. a memory, a melody, a proof that love was real and powerful and eternal. And sometimes, late at night when the city quieted, they would pause and listen. And if they were very still, very open, they might hear it somewhere in the distance, somewhere beyond the veil. The sound of a piano playing and a woman singing, together, finally, forever. This is the story of the player and cellist. This is the story of everyone who has ever loved and lost and searched and found. This is the story of music and memory and the spaces in between. This is the story of one night in New Orleans, when the rain fell soft and the music played true and a man finally went home. Rest now. The story is complete. The music fades. The night embraces all. And somewhere, in dreams or reality or that place where the two meet, two souls dance to a melody that never